Okay, and welcome to All Things Xbox Podcast. This is episode 3, and today, again, I have with me Logan. Logan, how you doing?
Doing great, Jamie. How about yourself?
Good, good. It's been a good week for news. We've had Halo stuff, the GTA details dropped, and new games, new big games finally. And honestly, it's good that, this time of year is normally stacked, but with a bunch of games getting pushed back, it's been a bit more relaxed. So, you know, on that front, it's been all right. But before we get into today's main topics, I want to have another rant about Square Enix. Um, because, why not?
I'll clear the aisle, man. You take the floor.
Yeah, so recently I just finished the Avengers campaign. Now, I want to put it out there. I've played Marvel's Avengers via Game Pass, and I've played it as a single player only game. I haven't played any of the multiplayer stuff, any of the shared world stuff, or any of the Destiny style loot stuff. Now, playing it as a single player game, I've enjoyed it. I think it's a really fun game. It took around about 20 hours to go through. So it wasn't bad. Wasn't bad at all. And I think more people should play it. So if people listening want a new single player game that's got superheroes in it and it looks gorgeous and it has great gameplay, play Avengers. You don't have to play all the loot stuff. You really don't. It's not the Destiny style game. And the thing is, whenever I talk about Destiny style games, people that are fans of Destiny may get bothered by that. I think Destiny is a fantastic game. It's just not for me. I don't like those style of games, but there's a huge audience out there for them. So when it came to this game, it was advertised heavily as a single player game that's got multiplayer stuff. So the game comes out and it has all this shared world stuff, and it's the way it has the game set up. It's clearly made to have players come back for months, and a lot of people say that the content isn't there. But the campaign in general is great. It has action set pieces, it has exploration, the combat is good. And the loot throughout the game, yeah, it's okay. A lot of the cosmetics are locked behind paywalls, which for a game like this, I kind of understand. But as a single player game, I loved it. It was a lot of fun. The story went places I didn't expect, but the rant isn't really about that. The rant is about Square Enix. And we're going to have a lot of rants about Square Enix in the future, I think, about it. So Square Enix, they marketed this game. They were saying, "Oh, it's got this good single player component. People are going to enjoy it." But the problem is that they clearly didn't give Crystal Dynamics the time they needed to make extra content for the loot based people out there. Because a lot of people talk about this game not having enough content. It has multiple expansions now. It has the Hawkeye stuff, the Black Panther expansion. People love the Black Panther thing. I personally can't wait to get towards it. But the problem is, and I have never seen many games do this, the expansions on Xbox, and I think it's probably the same for PlayStation, the expansions don't have achievements, which is a big draw for a lot of people. A lot of people like to get expansions for achievements and have achievements just be there in general, and it's weird to have expansions not support that. And it just seems like a very Square Enix thing to do. This is the publisher that put JRPGs in the past on Xbox and not activate achievements for 24 hours. Like, that's a problem. That's a big problem when it comes to Xbox in general, when it comes to Square Enix. And it's like, I hate seeing Square Enix's Western teams just not get the treatment they deserve. Square Enix do this over and over and over again. Eidos Montreal will talk about their new game in a bit, which is fantastic, by the way. And more people need to talk about it because I'm really surprised. I'm bloody surprised by how good Guardians of the Galaxy is. But again, we'll talk about that in a bit. Square Enix really need to lay up off their Western teams because if you look at their Japanese games, their developers get so much time and effort put into their marketing cycles. Like, people know what those games are. People didn't know what Avengers was, and that's a problem. And again, if you're listening and you want a single player game, just play Avengers as a single player game. I did. I don't like multiplayer games that much. Like, I liked Halo, I like Battlefield and the occasional COD, but as it comes to like Avengers, just skip the multiplayer stuff and play the expansions in time, and hopefully they will add achievements. But I don't know, man. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the Avengers as a single player experience is great. and the story is fascinating, and I love Square's Western teams. They do a great job. Deus Ex, and you have Tomb Raider, and they're just I feel they're criminally underutilized. Honestly, like Square Enix's biggest brands are more known for their Japanese side, but it does feel like these Western studios make great stuff. They're just not getting the pub they need, or the resources, or the time management. Then you mentioned how the Xbox, with not even having achievements for things, or for they don't activate something in time, or they'll only give one game in a series, and then it didn't sell well, so you won't get the rest, and it just I don't know, it drives you bonkers. But yeah, I feel like Crystal and Eidos would be better off if they were with someone else. I think obviously Xbox would be a good fit, but I mean, even just somewhere else, I feel like they are a lot better than what they look, and they look good, but I think they're really, really talented studios that, with the proper teams around them, they would really thrive.
Yeah. And the thing is, this has been going on for years. So if you look at things like Deus Ex Mankind Divided, absolutely fantastic game. They made them put a multiplayer mode in Deus Ex, which never made sense. And then the marketing cycle, and I don't know if anyone remembers, the marketing cycle for Deus Ex was horrendous. So a lot of games now have this thing where if you pre-order a game or get a Steelbook edition or digital deluxe, you get access to it 4 days early. A lot of games do that now. It's very much a standard. I think Forza Horizon does this, and it's pretty much accepted across the board. The problem is that with that game, Square Enix made them do it in batches. So basically, they would allocate the amount of days it would be available before the main release to the amount of pre-orders it had. So let's say they wanted 4 million pre-orders. That's when they would have access to playing it early. And it was just weird. It was a messy situation. And if anyone remembers how they were doing the whole Org Lives Matter thing back in 2016, it was badly handled. Bad timing for a marketing thing like that. And Square Enix, like, they just do it over and over again. And then you look at something like Final Fantasy XIV, the MMO, right? That came out in 2011 or 10, and it was disastrous. It had barely any content. People didn't like it. And what did Square Enix do? They got behind the studio, gave them all the time they needed, and then they basically re-released the game, and it's now one of the biggest MMOs on the planet. It has millions of players. People are going from WoW straight to Final Fantasy XIV because people love it. And it's like they give the Japanese teams all this leeway, and the Western teams just are struggling to make whatever they want. But yeah, for people listening, I'm going to rant about Square Enix a lot. This is a thing with podcasts, and yeah. Anyway, before we move on, have you got anything else on the topic?
No, there's that. I'll clarify and say that I love the games that Square makes. I love the brands: Final Fantasy, Tomb Raider, Deus Ex. You even got Soul Reaver and Gex the Gecko, a whole bunch of old stuff as well. Like, they make awesome stuff, and they're respected for a reason. It's just there's a few odd things in particular that stand out that you feel like if were handled a little differently, it would make them even better. And it just seems that, at least from the outside looking in, that a good bit of those happen to affect their Western publishing branch, which is, Crystal and Eidos. So I don't know. It's just interesting.
Yeah, hopefully that the whole situation gets better because, again, they are capable of making great games across the board. But anyway, before we get into the main topics, I just want to say this is still a new podcast. People, please share. I have great ambitions for the show and things to come. And yeah, anyway, all that nonsense aside, let's talk about the topics. So first up, Grand Theft Auto Definitive Edition. These are old games, and people weren't expecting a lot. But the rumours are true. It's had a complete visual overhaul across the board. So you have Grand Theft Auto 3, Vice City, and San Andreas, and the games look good. Like, a lot of people were expecting either nothing or a complete remake, but honestly, the games look good. They are in Unreal Engine 4 now, which was a surprising move. But the games look good. And the biggest thing that's going to be for these games is that they have Grand Theft Auto 5 style controls. So if anyone remembers, third person games before Gears didn't control good. So unless you were Gears of War or Resident Evil 4, these games were bad. They were so bad. Like, third person controls basically worked as your character would fire at whatever direction the character was facing. And you could never aim at whatever you wanted. So whenever you see clips of San Andreas now, it's just the person spinning around trying to hit characters. It was terrible. But yeah, it was bad at the time. But now, GTA 5 controls in a game that old, or should I say 3 games, that's fantastic. It's going to make the games so much better to play. And the big surprise about these announcements is that you're going to have GTA San Andreas in Game Pass day one, which was a surprising move because these are big games. These are going to be selling in the millions for years to come. This is going to be one of the biggest sellers for Christmas. So when they announced they're going to be basically splitting it up for, PlayStation Now and, Xbox Game Pass, I was surprised because it's Rockstar and it's Take-Two. They like money. So, but then after thinking about it, they're basically going to use these games and these, marketing tactics to incentivize people to buy the other games. Because I know for a fact that the second I saw that Game Pass announcement, it occurred to me, cool, I'll only have to buy Vice City and GTA 3 to finish the collection. So that's Take-Two and, Rockstar's marketing cycle and their tactic. It works. I fell for it, and I'm ready and I'm willing to, pay for those games up front. But even though right now you can't buy them individually, I do very much suspect they'll be made available shortly, after launch. And that's going to be coming the November 11th on every platform, but the physical editions will be launching in December. Now, details of the next-gen versions, we're still waiting, but Xbox Series X, you're going to be getting 4K, 60 frames, HDR, which it's going to be really nice in those games. And like the gameplay they showed, even though it was only about 50 seconds long, I really like the look of these games. What do you think?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I didn't have high hopes for the for the trilogy remaster. I was worried that they were legit just gonna slightly upscale and put a fresh coat of paint on it and bundle them all together and ship them out again and just be like, there you go, they're on modern console, have at it. But they did a really good job, it looks like, and I love personally the design changes they've made to Vice City and 3 in particular. Like, the characters are way more vibrant looking and the color palette, especially in, Vice City, because, you got this 80s Miami Beach vibes, and it's just the neon really shines out. And just the character models, it almost kind of makes me think of I know this might be a random example, but Link's Awakening, how the new remake they did of that on the Switch, how it took the old Game Boy Color or Game Boy game and gave it a way different like claymation and style change, but ended up working and bringing a new vibrance to it. In a way, the characters kind of remind me in a way of that because they look much more colorful and different than they did before. It's not just a minor little upgrade. And then like the guys have fingers now. They're not just like club hands anymore. So that's really good as well. And I'm looking forward to it, especially with the GTA 5 style combat. Tank controls, I love them sometimes. And, survival horror games, they're a classic and a staple. But for a lot of games, they kind of make you want to pull your hair out. They get really frustrating. And especially in a game like GTA, this is a welcome change. And I'm not surprised at all that they're kind of jostling position with Sony and Xbox, where one gets 3 and the other one gets San Andreas for their respective subscription services. Doesn't shock me at all. very Rockstar Take-Two kind of move. And yeah, like you, I wouldn't be shocked if they separate them eventually, and you can get, yeah, I really like three, but I wasn't a fan of Vice City or San Andreas, or if you were a fan of San or whatever, you could get that one individually. But I'm looking forward to it a lot more than I was when it was first announced.
Yeah, now that you mention it, I completely forgot that, characters had mittens for hands. Like they didn't have fingers, and cutscenes it just looked like they were doing like samurai chops a lot of the time, which it always looked a bit weird. But I think when it comes to a lot of these older games, we have these rose tinted glasses. We think these games looked really good back in the day, and then we see the comparisons. It's like, oof, they never looked good. Like San Andreas, that used to have pop in like 20 feet away. So when they announced that, there's going to be like, pretty much instant load and zero pop in, that's great. And I'll list all the enhancements now. So the weapon and radio system has been updated, so you're going to have a radio wheel now and a weapon wheel, which you never had in the original games. The ability to immediately restart a failed mission. So if anyone's played Vice City, especially, you'll know that driving to your next mission always had to like restart every single time you failed, which won't be an issue anymore. The games will include full-on mini-maps that rotate, which will help with some of the missions now. Next up, we have high-resolution textures across the board. Character models have been redone. Weapons have been redone. Vehicles have been redone. And even the roads have higher quality textures and polygon counts. Next up, we have complete lighting enhancement with enhanced shadows. So in the first, I should say GTA 3, low resolution shadows across the board were extremely noticeable, especially when it comes to and here's the thing, Grand Theft Auto 3 on the PlayStation 2 was revolutionary. We never played a game like it, but even back then, like, shadows looked bad, especially, but even back then, the game looked good, especially when it was raining. So now you're going to have, enhanced shadows, which will just make the game look good. Improved water physics and weather effects. Enhanced detail with trees and foliage. So before, plants wouldn't even interact with the character or vehicles. Enhanced draw distance, which is good. 4K resolution support for next generation consoles. And if you're playing this on an NVIDIA RTX card, you're going to be able to get DLSS support. So across the board, everyone's getting something. Even the Switch. The Switch is getting gyro controls, which I never would have thought they'd do. But hey, it looks like they've done a good upgrade. And with this being Rockstar, they're going to make millions. It's going to sell millions. It's going to be one of the biggest sellers this Christmas. And we all know, we've all seen that person in GameStop or in-game in the UK where you'll see your mother or father buying their 5-year-old kid a copy of Grand Theft Auto, because that completely makes sense. It'll happen. It's going to continue to happen. But yeah, I can't wait for it. They are old games, but at the end of the day, it's going to let more people that have never experienced these to play them for the first time. Grand Theft Auto games, they've influenced almost every form of media, from music to movies. So it's a big deal. I can't wait for it. And the thing is, what does this mean for the future of Rockstar games? This will do well. People have messaged me saying, if this does well, will we see other games? No. It's not an if, it's a when. This will do well, and we will see other games. So, of course, I'm obviously going to bring up the Max Payne trilogy. Rockstar Games has Max Payne now. Max Payne 3 is bloody good. And hold on, I have to read this comment. No disrespect, but why say exclusive when they're all on PC? Right. I don't get this comment, because I talk about things. I do not have a problem with people talking about Xbox games being on PC, but when we say Xbox exclusive, it doesn't take two brain cells to work out what that means. Xbox exclusive means Xbox ecosystem. That's just all it means. That's the only time I'm ever gonna reply to this comment, because I get it once every so often. Like, the PlayStation ecosystem includes PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, and it used to include Vita. Now it includes PC, Xbox One, Xbox Series consoles, and xCloud devices such as smartphones and tablets. That's the only time I'm going to address this. Please stop it. Anyway, back to the whole Rockstar thing. This will do well, and we will see Max Payne in the future. But one of the things that I want to talk about is Red Dead. Red Dead Redemption has never been on PC. It was available on PS3 as well, but they don't have backwards compatibility. So people have been talking about Red Dead Redemption a lot. They lost the source code to that, so they would actually have to completely re-engineer the game from scratch, basically from the 360 version. So there has been rumors in the past 18 months that we could see Red Dead Redemption completely re-engineered from scratch for new devices. I think it will happen. We've seen it in the past with other games. Final Fantasy VIII got remastered, and that was re-engineered from scratch. So it's possible. But anyway, what's your thought on the whole situation?
Oh, I 100% would expect this game is going to sell ludicrous numbers. I mean, you see GTA 5 came out like what feels like 10 years ago, and it's still always in the top 10 charts everywhere. And, these are beloved and inspired five.
Okay, I think Logan has disconnected. Logan, I think you may need to check your connection. Yeah, Logan, you may need to dip out of the call and jump back in. Sorry if we seem to be having some technical difficulties because, weather situation is all over the place at the minute. But anyway, the whole GTA situation is weird because Grand Theft Auto 4 is stuck on the 360 generation. We've gone a long time without being able to play that game on modern hardware. We can't play it via backwards compatibility. It does run at 60 frames on Xbox Series consoles now, which is cool. But the truth is, people want to play that. Grand Theft Auto 5, that's became a meme, but hey, it's a good game regardless. People want to play the older games on new hardware, and why not? I think it's okay for people to want to be able to play older games on newer hardware. But also that game had expansions. Like back then, we used to get expansions for a lot of single player games. But the expansions for that, so we had The Lost and the Damned, which was a biker experience across the board. It was pretty much Sons of Anarchy, but set in the Grand Theft Auto universe, which was awesome. And then we had The Ballad of Gay Tony, which was a brilliant expansion that had set pieces that were better than the main game itself. And honestly, the expansions in that game almost acted as individual titles. So, I don't know. Logan, are you back? Okay, Logan is still missing. Anyway. Okay, you should be jumping back in a minute. Logan, are you there? Okay, Logan, I don't know if you can hear me, but there's no sound coming from your device.
Okay, can you hear me now?
There we go. Okay.
My apologies. There was some tech difficulties. We got some storms in the area. Yeah, Rockstar has a bunch of old IP that I wouldn't be surprised at all to see come back in some capacity. Whether it's Bully or Manhunt, if they would even attempt to try that in this point in society, or Bully, or if they resurrected Agent. But I think this is a great test case, and it should fly with soaring colors.
Yeah, it will do well. It's just a question of like when we'll see more. But Take Two in the past they have said they want remasters to be more of a regular thing, and I get it. Some people will say, why is there so many remasters? You have to think about it like this. Like, the pandemic pushed back a lot of game development. Games across the board have been pushed back from 10 to 18 months. So if you think about it, at the beginning of this year, we were meant to see things like Gotham Knights, and throughout the year, we were meant to see things like Hogwarts Legacy, but everything was pushed. So if you've seen in the past month, we've had multiple remasters. So things like the Crisis Trilogy comes out, people love it. Things like Alan Wake Remastered come out, people love it. And it's like, it's just something we're going to have to accept in society at the minute. You know, remasters will be a thing to stay. But, you know, I don't really have a problem with it. If people don't want an exclusive, or should I say a remaster, just don't buy it. That's literally what you should do. Vote with your wallet. If you want more, buy more. If you want less, don't buy them. Rockstar needs to bring back Oni. Yeah, I think Rockstar should bring back a lot. In the whole Bully situation, I think Bully could not work at the minute with everything going on in the world. But, you know, you never know. Like, society goes through cycles with things, so maybe we will see that. I would love to see Manhunt return, but I think we could all admit that Manhunt has zero chance of returning, especially with the things you could do in that game.
Yeah, it's like Conquer, but on a different wavelength of controversial.
Yeah, and the thing about that game is that you could literally like take carrier bags and put them over people's heads. It's like it was a grim game, very grim. But you know, we will see more Rockstar games. And here's the thing: like Grand Theft Auto 5 is going to get, you know, its next generation thing. Again, if you want something, vote with your wallet. Like, I don't buy games I don't want, and I'll buy things I do want. Like that's literally it. Just vote with your wallet. Next up, I want to talk about this. I've been so excited about this, and I know there's people listening that have played this. Eidos Montreal's Guardians of the Galaxy. I had high expectations for this game. I really did. And this game exceeded it. It has blown me away. Now, I have gameplay on screen right now. Like, this game is so good. Now, this has nothing to do with Avengers. It's a single-player action-adventure. Funny enough, I've been advertising this game more than them. I've been trying to tell people that it's a single-player game. They even put out a trailer today that literally says single-player action-adventure at the beginning. And it's like, it's hard to miss. But across the board, this game is fantastic. It has action set pieces, which will blow people away. The soundtrack, I don't want to spoil for people, because there's moments throughout this game where a random song will start playing when something happens, and it's hilarious. Like, I almost woke my neighbors up last night because of a certain song playing at a certain time. But it's like, this game is so well crafted. The Milano, your ship, where you basically spend time in between missions, it's just so good. So when you play a Mass Effect, the Normandy is the hub, and it always feels like it's a very much lived-in ship. It feels like it serves a purpose, and everything in this ship has a purpose. You can go into all of the Guardians' quarters and see things that would only belong to that Guardian. Like, one of my biggest worries about this game was the characters. Would they be well written? Would they have good voice acting, good personality? And I'm happy to say across the board, bloody fantastic. Like, the characters are absolutely nailed. You know, they aren't trying too hard to be the movie characters, and they're not trying too hard to be like the comic characters. They're nice in between. And, you know, Gamora feels like a new character. Rocket feels like a new character. Groot and Drax all feel well done. And even, you know, I was going to say Chris Pratt, but Quill, so well done. Like, the characters across the board are great. And the action's very different. So if you've played Tomb Raider or Uncharted, you're going to feel at home. But with it being sci-fi, they have all these extra things they can do. So again, set pieces in space and starships all over the place. And it's just so good. So if anyone's played, I'm trying to explain the combat system because it's so different to what people are used to. So in a typical action adventure where you have pistols, you know, you aim and shoot and you have melee weapons, it's kind of like that. But since you have these Guardians, the Guardians themselves act as abilities. So think of Assassin's Creed. You hold down a trigger and you have access to 4 face buttons, which gives you 4 different abilities. They work like that. So you hold down the bumper, you hit a face button for whatever Guardian that you want to use, and then you hit whatever face button you use. So each Guardian has access to 4 abilities, which you can upgrade over time. The game actually has light RPG mechanics across the board, and it's very easy to understand. Literally anyone could understand this. Because I know when you say things like crafting system and upgrade tree, people think, oh god, this is going to be all over the place. Because if you played something like Pillars of Eternity or Path of Exile, those upgrade trees are a bit intimidating. But not here. It's very relaxed. It's easy to understand. And one of the cool things about this game is that the skins you unlock. We live in an age where everything is a microtransaction, and they could have done that with this game, but it's not. You literally just find the skins as you're exploring. And one of the missions you do early on, you're literally just walking around a corner and you're meant to go one way, and there's a small room off to your left, and you go in there and there's a skin. And it's that simple. There's no microtransactions, none of that stuff. And it's just such a refreshing experience. And it's like, have you played it, Logan?
I actually have not played the new Guardians game because I've been focused on horror games for October. It's generally what I focus on. I mean, I play them all the time anyway, but in particularly in October. But it's definitely one I have my eye on, and I've been hearing great things about it, especially from you. We talked about it earlier, and seeing the review scores for it has been great. And I'm glad that music plays a huge part of it, and it sounds like they've nailed the characters and the overall vibes of it. And it's definitely one I want to get and add to my collection. And that steelbook is really nice as well. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And they're some of my favorite characters in the MCU, so I'm glad they've been done justice.
Yeah, so everyone's idol, Goro, in chat said, sounds like Jedi Fallen Order. Now, I'm happy to say that this game is a lot like that. Now, it's not as open-ended with, going back and forth in a map. It's not like that, but like Jedi Fallen Order came out at the back end of 2019, I believe, and it surprised everyone. It was a single-player game with no microtransactions. It reviewed well, people loved it, and it turned out to be the second biggest selling game of the year it released. I feel like this is like that. It's single player. It's high quality. The facial expressions and motion capture in this game is top notch. Like, if you like Uncharted and things like Tomb Raider, you're gonna love this game. Like, some of the best facial capture happens in this game, and I was just surprised. The soundtrack. Now, there is a set list of songs throughout this game, which you can turn off if you want to stream it. But there's the songs from like Rick Astley, Iron Maiden, New Kids on the Block, things like that. There's like tons of metal. It's just such a well done soundtrack, and the soundtrack makes that game. So early on, the Guardians mess up, and then all of a sudden, Rick Astley's "Never Gonna Give You Up" starts playing, and it's hilarious. Like, the game's like genuinely funny. Rocket keeps saying stuff that just makes you laugh. I can't say enough good things about this. Like, I went into this expecting a lot, and they've even surprised me. Like, we complain as a society of gamers about not many single player games, everything being open world, and everything being full of microtransactions. And this game's none of that. People say they want more superhero games. People say they want more third person over the shoulder games. Like, this is a third party game. Support it. Like, if you want more of this, support it. Like, it has none of that extra crap. And the thing is, this game would not work as co-op. It would not work as open world. Like, it seems like they've made a game that's perfect for the right time. Because if you think about it, everything moving forward's a live service. Assassin's Creed Infinity is going to be a live service. Avengers was a live service. This is not. This is none of that. It has none of the baggage of that stuff. And when you finish the game, you move on to something else. But the cool thing about this game, it has replayability. So it has a new game plus mode. It has photo mode. People are really going to take advantage of this photo mode, because when you're looking out of your starship and you see planets like just off in the distance, it's a gorgeous game. It's bloody gorgeous. But the replayability of this is going to come into the choices. So there's light dialogue choices throughout the entire game, which change things in certain events. But the characters being so funny, you kind of want to hear what they would have said in certain situations. It's just so good. It's so good. Like, I've had a smile on my face throughout this entire game so far, and apparently it's about 20 hours long. From what I'm hearing from a few different people, it's about 20 hours long, which for this type of game, it seems perfect. So again, it's up there with Tomb Raider and Uncharted for, amount of content. But with it being the sci-fi setting, like the set pieces that happen within the first half an hour of the game where you're jumping from like starship to starship, like it's so over the top, but it works so well. And I don't know, like I'm happy for Eidos Montreal because they've been able to make a game they clearly like. This is the A team, right? This is the A squad at Eidos Montreal. The Deus Ex team have made this, and it's pure awesomeness. The quality is amazing. The dialogue is fantastic. The action is different. Like, people will play this and think, I've never played anything like this, because it's so refreshing. Even the way ammo works. So, Peter Quill's pistols, there's no ammo. So basically, they overheat. But there's also an active reload feature, like gears, for your pistols, so you can start using them again. So if you hit the button at the right time, it cools them down instantly. Peter Quill's pistol has access to different elements, so if you're going up against an ice enemy, you can use fire pistols, and it's just like, it's so good. Like, I'm happy this game came out, because we haven't had anything like this in a long time. And I know, like, Microsoft, we don't know at the minute, we'll talk about this in a bit, but like, people want more superhero games on Xbox. Support this game. Support this game. And when people say people don't buy games on Xbox because they're in Game Pass, prove them wrong. Buy this game. Like, I'm only about 4 or 5 hours into this game or something, and like, I have to say, it's a must-play game already. Like, it really is. It's just so good. Like, honestly, this could be a 3-hour podcast, and I could probably talk about the whole time. Like, it's just so good.
Yeah, I'm glad it's good, man.
But let me know what you think when you play it. Like, if anyone in chat has like played it, please say what you want about the game, because like, it's really interesting. Because a lot of people have been saying like, oh yeah, it's like Uncharted, it's like Tomb Raider, but it also has these little Mass Effect moments throughout the game, which was not really expected. And when I say something's like Mass Effect, I'm gonna scrutinize the hell out of it, because if someone says it's like Mass Effect, I'm gonna bloody check. And yeah, it has Mass Effect vibes throughout it, because again, you're in your ship, the ship has personality. If anyone listening does intend on buying it, please, one of the first things you're going to do is explore the ship. Look in all the crew quarters. You'll see things that will make you laugh. I'll just put it that way. But yeah, honestly, congratulations, Eidos Montreal. They did an amazing job with this game. I think more people need to support this, because it's not really the fan base's fault. It's also kind of society, in the way, again, Square Enix has just treated this game. One of the biggest brands on the planet, Marvel, Square Enix has barely advertised this. And it's kind of heartbreaking, because I haven't finished this game. I haven't reached halfway point, but I already know I want sequels. That's how good it is. And I'm just concerned that Square Enix hasn't done a good enough job, because they wait the day of release to put out a trailer that says single player action adventure. Something I've been tweeting for 4 months is something they just did today in a trailer. And it's like, how does a billion-dollar corporation not know how to market a game properly, yet I can? Like, that's sad. That's really sad. And like, as you can tell from the gameplay on screen, it's so good, and it's different. And I think that's what gaming needs. Everything's the same now. It really is. Like, look at Ubisoft's games, and this is not me hating on Ubisoft. I think Ubisoft games are fantastic. They're filled with a lot of content and just a lot of different options to do things. But the truth is, a lot of their games are the same. People want something fresh. Support this game. Guardians of the Galaxy is literally a must-play title. People are already telling me it's their game of the year. And when it comes to the whole game of the year lineup, this game has thrown a spanner in the works for me, because I kind of had a layout in my head of what my top 10 games of the year were going to be. Now that I've played this, it's going to be pretty high. It's going to be pretty high. Depending on what happens next, who knows? But like, this is game of the year material that nobody's talking about. Really, like, it's just so good. Like, I can continue talking about this, but again, like, I talk about sci-fi games all the time. If you follow me on Twitter, the link will be in the description down below. But like, I talk about sci-fi games all the time, and this is the first sci-fi action adventure third-person game I've ever played, and it's amazing. It really is. Anyway, that's enough of me gushing about this game, because It's sci-fi. I could talk about it all day. Let's talk about Halo. Halo. They came out the other day and said they're going to show new campaign footage. I posted a video yesterday going in depth about it. Watch that. We're still going to talk about that now, but Halo looks good now. It genuinely does. I was really impressed with how the game looks. I was impressed with how open it is, and there has been some clarification on the openness. I already knew about this, but people are getting it mixed up. It isn't open world. Now, I'm doing air quotes. It has open sections. So think things like Dragon Age. Dragon Age is a good example where you have multiple different zones. It looks like each level will just be an open play space, much like the original Halo. Original Halo maps are huge, but in this game you're actually going to have things to do. Like drive off a cliff while you have other people on board. Because that was safe apparently. But honestly, I'm really impressed with how it looks. Like they've took the past year to just enhance detail across the board, like from individual details on floor panels to things like facial expressions. The game looks good, and I think I see too many people online just trying to tear this game apart still. It's like they aren't really fans of gaming, in my opinion. Like if you're zooming in 10,000% on an image in a 1080p image and then you're loading the resolution afterwards, yeah, that's a bit crappy. But like the game looks good. I was surprised with how much they showed, because they showed a lot of story content, which was surprising. They showed bosses. Bosses have been something I've been wanting in Halo for decades. Like there's been bosses in the past, but I think there should be a boss in every other Halo level. And with this being the biggest Halo game to date, having an open structure for missions, like throwing bosses in there, it just works in my opinion. And now you have access to all these different upgrades now. There's a skill tree, and I saw people a bit concerned when they saw the thruster. Honestly, when I played Halo Infinite, I was kind of missing the thruster pack. I kind of was. But it's like, if you don't want the thruster pack, don't use it. You're going to be able to upgrade whatever you want in this game. You can upgrade the grapple shot that much in this game. You're going to be able to have it electrified, which would damage enemies at the same time. But anyway, what do you think, Logan?
Well, my first thoughts are hail to the chief. Halo's back. Incredible. The campaign was the one thing I was concerned about, besides from a visual fidelity standpoint, because I knew the multiplayer. Given Halo 5's rights and wrongs, one thing that was commonly agreed upon was the multiplayer was really good, and so I'm thrilled that they seem to have found the happy medium between calling back to the past and also pushing the world and narrative forward. With Cortana is back and she's purple again, which is really cool. Um, and just how it's gonna address the decisions that happened in Halo 5 and how things are gonna go forward, and then with the Banished and the weapon and Atriox and the other brutes and the bosses are an awesome idea. Because I remember back in Halo 2, you had the brute chieftain at the end, and you also had prophets you had to fight and other things like that. So I think bosses are an awesome addition. I think the hub-based world like Dragon Age Inquisition it's an awesome choice for this game, because instead of the hinterlands, you have this this region where you have a fuel depot you need to destroy, and then you've got a factory over here, and then a marine base or an enemy encampment, and then and the upgrades and skill tree and the fluidity of the combat. I just they've ratcheted everything up to an 11. It feels like they have borrowed some of the good aspects from Ubisoft and some of these other games that have the kind of upgrade and open world setting, but have molded it in a way that fits Halo and is more scaled down to their set, to where you feel like you're in a big world, but it's not overwhelming, yet it feels concise. And I'm thrilled for it. My hype is at a fever pitch. it just makes me even go scratch my head a little bit. Like, man, it's crazy to think that what this game might have been like if they had tried to release it when they originally planned on it. It's just that delay was a blessing in disguise. The visuals are just otherworldly better than they were before. I mean, they weren't terrible, but they just definitely weren't what we see now. And they fine tuned everything. Craig got a huge glow up. He looks glowing in his awesome shiny light cutscenes and everything. And just, I'm excited. Can't wait, man.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest takeaway about the whole Halo situation. It's that excitement. People are looking forward towards Halo now. You know, people have gone from being extremely critical of the game, whether they were right or wrong. People across the board were critical, to now people enjoy it. You know, we played the multiplayer. I thought it was fantastic. And the funny thing is, like, I've always preferred 343's version of storytelling. You know, Halo to me has always been between Halo, shall I say, Master Chief and Cortana, the personal story between them, while, you know, they're still trying to save the galaxy. And it's like, to me, 343 is just better at storytelling, like cinematic storytelling. Like, Bungie's games were good, but it's like, get with the times, their games just tell stories better, in my opinion. But, you know, they listen to feedback. People wanted something like they've played in the past. And the thing is, 343 somehow done the impossible. They've heard concerns over the years for people complaining about sprint and all that nonsense. I should say the nonsense of people complaining about sprint, but it's like they've almost made a game that caters to two audiences. There's the people like me that, you know, I adapt to the games I play. I want new content. I don't want to play the same game for 10 years. And they've made that game. But they've also made a game that makes people that love Halo 3 and just want more of that. Even though it has the most enhanced mobility system to date with the grapple hook. And it's like, across the board, people are happy, you know? And that's the most important thing. Like, Halo has always been this game that's like where the fan base is split. You know, very much like Star Wars. People will complain day and night. There's accounts on YouTube where their sole purpose in life is to just whine about Halo. That's all their content is. And it's like, talk about things you like. Anyway, that's just me. But across the board, Halo looks good. You know, the whole Ubisoft thing I've seen people talk about. I like the best thing about Ubisoft games, in my opinion, are the outposts. And we've had outposts in Ubisoft games since Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. So it's been a long time. But I like the fact that we have these places where we can, you know, tackle objectives in whatever order we want and how we want. Because people are going to go through these, you know, outposts just using the grapple shot. And then they're going to post some clips online of them swinging through, you know, zipping all over the place like Spider-Man. And we're going to have people using the sniper rifle. And it's like, it's the point of these outposts is to give the player different options. So with a game like Halo Infinite and you have more options than ever before, it just means replayability is there. And you have to think about Halo games get more replayed than probably any other Microsoft game. Like, people play Halo games yearly and for decades. Like, people play them all the time. I've played Halo 4 more times than I can think of. Halo Reach, I've probably played like 20 times. Like, these games get a lot of replay value. So when you put things like this that give people people and players like the ability to go through things different ways, it's just exciting. It means more content. You know, you have to think about it like this. We are paying for a campaign. Like, the multiplayer is free. They have to provide enough content there that makes you think, okay, there's my $60 worth of value. Yes, it's going to be in Game Pass, but like, people will still buy it. I'm still going to buy Halo. Like, I love Halo. I need it for the collection. But yeah, my only concern is I think Microsoft does need to start doing more collector's editions for their big games, because things like Gears and Halo and Forza should have them, but that's a different, you know, story for another day. But yeah, I think the game looks good, and the important thing is that, you know, if you extract all the whiners on Twitter that are zooming in 10,000%, almost entirely across the board, people enjoy what they've seen, and that's the most important part, especially in a fan base like Halo where everything is scrutinized down to, like, you know, single hairs. So 343's done the impossible. They've done the impossible of making a fan base kind of come together for the first time ever. We still have sprint. People aren't complaining for the most part. We have enhanced mobility with the grapple shot. People aren't complaining. We have open sections like the original Halo, but now we have things to do because in the original Halo, there was nothing. You couldn't do anything. You had to drive from point A to point B in a huge open space with nothing else to do. And they've kind of made something that caters to all kinds of gamers. So I don't know. I think they've done a fantastic job.
Yeah, I'm thrilled with how they've handled it, and it looks perfect to me. I cannot wait, and I 100% agree with you on the needing more collector's editions. Like, I don't know, it kind of bums me that there's only like a steelbook edition that you can get certain places. There's not like a legendary edition. That was one of my favorite collectibles ever, was getting that Halo 3 legendary edition with the helmet and the box and everything. I wish they would do that again, but maybe it's just a different strategy for Xbox going forward.
Yeah, while we're on it, like the last big, shall I say, collector's edition for Microsoft, I think was actually Gears of War 4, where the character was on the motorcycle. Like I have that. It's massive. It's heavy, and it's like we don't really say anything. Like steelbooks are cool. I like steelbooks, but like people buy crap. It's like I think that's one of like Microsoft's things they have to work on. It's like gamers are willing to put the money down for collector's editions, for merchandise. They are investing more money in merchandise now more than ever. They've got the Gears store, although I think they need to put more things in there like statues and art. But like they really need to make more collector's editions. Like Sea of Thieves is huge, and there wasn't really a collector's edition. Yeah, there's been the special controller and all that stuff, but it's like we should have statues for all their big games. When we see Fable come back, there needs to be a collector's edition statue. When Perfect Dark comes out,
100%.
we need to see a Joanna Dark statue that's got like all this cool cyberpunk theme, because that's what Perfect Dark is, cyberpunk. It's like, why can't they do this? Like, Gears Tactics didn't have a collector's edition or a steelbook, at least in the UK anyway. It's like, I think they really need to fix that. And this wasn't a topic, which I'll mention now. Age of Empires came out today on PC, and people are loving it. The reviews across the board are fantastic. Aside from a few bugs, RTS games have bugs. Like if people have been playing them for a while, like I've never played an RTS game that has never had bugs. And that includes PC. So things like Star Trek Armada 1 and 2, Star Wars Empire at War, and Homeworld 1 and 2, especially the first game, all had bugs across the board. And it's like, I think they really need to port this to console. Like, they have said in the past they may bring it to console, and I get it. A game like this has heavy keyboard and mouse, like, interactivity, but it's like, if Gears Tactics can work on a controller, like XCOM, like, I think they can get this to work. Like, RTS games on console can play well. If anyone's played Halo Wars 1 and 2 using wheels to, like, do commands, it works. And I know there's a small fan base on Xbox that want more RTS games, and they will pay for them. Like, I would buy Age of Empires for Xbox, because
Same.
if you search right now, like outside of Halo Wars 1 and 2, the backwards compatible version of Halo Wars, the definitive edition of Halo Wars, and then you have Supreme Commander 2 on the Xbox 360 via backwards compatibility. That's pretty much it. Like, you have some indie titles that do RTS stuff, but like, we have three, basically, like three big ones, and that's just not enough. It really isn't. And like, hopefully we will get it later on. They do have a studio that's dedicated to RTS games now, so who knows? We probably will see it in the future. Anyway, backwards compatibility came back in the news, and there have been people online hinting at the fact that we will see more games. I have heard we will see more. The question is when. But all these random games have been popping up on the store. These games that aren't backwards compatible. And if you search on Xbox right now, games that aren't backwards compatible, they don't show up. So if you search Max Payne 3, unfortunately, it breaks my heart, nothing shows up whatsoever. But people have been finding games listed. Games have been listed in the past that have been available for backwards compatibility later on. And games do show up in the software database that have been tested. Obviously, everything can't be backwards compatible, because there's just so many licensed titles out there and so many games with licensed music that they just can't get everything. But the 15th anniversary, or should I say 20th anniversary of Xbox is coming up, and there's been rumors flying around that we will see more backwards compatible games. It does seem like the most appropriate opportunity would be this event. Because again, they've said there's not going to be any new titles. And while we're on this topic, I just want to specify that they said no new titles.
Not
They've
old titles.
Yeah, like they can already talk about old titles and they can already talk about games that have been announced. Everything from Perfect Dark, Fable, and all that stuff. But it's like back to backwards compatibility. It's like there's still games people want. Like there's a small fan base of people that just say, or I should say, a small group of people that don't want backwards compatible games. They just want new stuff, and I'll never understand that. I buy Blu-rays. I will watch them for years. I have things like Aliens that came out in the 80s and late 70s. I still like to watch them. It's like that with games. Why do people have this thing about video games where they just want the new thing, the new shiny thing? Are they a dog? Are they chasing something? Like that? I don't get this thing, the stigma about old games. I just don't get it. Like there's a difference between wanting old games available for players and not wanting to play it. You just don't have to play it if you don't want it. There's a lot of people out there, like me, like you, that want more games added. Max Payne 3 plays better than almost every other third-person shooter since. And that came out in 2012. Like, it blows my mind that came out then, and it has better handling for gunplay than GTA 5 that released a year later. Like, how is that a thing? It shouldn't be a thing, but it is. And we have all these games like The Saboteur by Paradox Interactive. That game shut down, or I should say the studio shut down, pretty much before the game came out. And it's Assassin's Creed in World War II. Like, who wouldn't want to play that? Like, if that game does get backwards compatible support, more people need to play it. If you want Assassin's Creed in a World War II setting, that is literally that game. But like, it looks like we will be seeing more games. Again, there's been 2 more games listed in the database, and I don't know. What do you think, man?
Nothing would make me happier than another batch of backwards compatibility. I would love it. The program means so much to me. A bunch of my library is frankly these older games that I either missed or I cherished or I wanted to revisit. And, like you mentioned earlier with Halo, the replayability, PC, allows you to go back and experience these franchises again and again and again and to introduce them to a new audience as well. Like, like a new generation. It's like, oh, I never heard of this, or oh, the newest Halo 6 or whatever's coming out. I want to experience the story and how it got to this point. And so the ability to do that is only a good thing. And anything detracting from that is madness. But yeah, I think that would literally be the perfect way to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Xbox is to have another batch of BC. Whether it's a few titles that, were handpicked and it's like, these were ones that were highly requested and we know people really want them. Here you go. Whether it's a bigger batch that has some of those and then just a whole bunch of different titles that they were able to get approved, whatever it would hypothetically end up being, I would just be personally thrilled if there's more BC. And there's certainly been a lot of teases out there from articles and people leaking stuff that it sounds like there's a good chance of that. And nothing would make me happier. And there's definitely a lot of games I would like to see. Saboteur is high that among them. The Fear Saga, Max Payne trilogy, Eternal Sonata. Um, there's a ton of OG titles, and then hidden gems that people might not think about. Like sometimes I see people knock a game that didn't sell well or wasn't the highest reviewed, but it has a fan base because games at the end of the day bring joy to some people, and some people are just not fans of them. But why knock it if somebody would like the opportunity to play it and it meant something to them? Then I would be happy for them if they got that game playable. I'm not gonna knock a game just because it's not my genre or my style of choice, if it gets added, I'll be like, okay, cool. That was for somebody else besides me, but I'm happy that they get the opportunity to play that.
Yeah, it's a big deal because if you think about it, like these new consoles, the Xbox Series X and S and PlayStation 5 launched in November. If it wasn't for backwards compatibility, both of those consoles would have had about 10 games, like in the store. Like, people forget that almost every game that's out now are backwards compatible. Not all games have next gen optimizations. Like, we still have new backwards compatible games released in general. Like, games where made by small developers where they don't have next gen dev kits are backwards compatible the second they launch. So you have to think about like this. Like we're going to be playing backwards compatible games from the Xbox One generation and the PlayStation 4 generation for a long time because the current situation we're in. Who does the thing is, what is wrong with having more games? Absolutely nothing. Nothing wrong with it. And the thing is, we had complete genres disappear last generation. Linear third-person shooters that weren't made by Microsoft or Sony don't exist. Don't exist in general. But during the 360 generation, we were getting them maybe 4 or 5 times a year. We were getting Gears clones a few times a year, which were actually pretty good. We had Medal of Honor 2010, which was really good. The Saboteur, ridiculously underrated open world game set in World War II Paris, where it was black and white until you liberated certain areas. It was fantastic. We don't get a lot of that now. Everything is the same. It really is. So with backwards compatibility, we just have access to a wider variety of genres. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. And we also have to talk about features. Like, other than a new list of games added, we could have more frames per second boosts. Because imagine playing Arkham Knight at 60 frames. I would love that. You know, Dying Light at 60 frames is perfect. It really is. And then we also have the resolution enhancements for Xbox 360 games. Like, Final Fantasy 13 has no right to look as good as it does. But it does. Red Dead Redemption in 4K, amazing. The whole Splinter Cell franchise, 4K, looks amazing. And again, I will talk about this game at every opportunity. If anyone has an Xbox One X, or Series X, or Series S, play Star Wars The Force Unleashed. Your mind will be blown at how good that looks. You can actually see screen space reflections now that were on the Xbox 360. Like, I have no idea how they did that, but it was there, and it was awesome. So it's like, they have so much to offer. So not just new games, but also enhancements as well. Because you have to think about it. The Xbox One, PlayStation 4 generation were plagued from start to finish with 30 frames games. Every other game, 30 frames. So now, at an age where we have these super fast CPUs, wouldn't we like to play these games again at a high frame rate? I know I would. Like, there's games, and especially the 360 generation. I know that the backcompat team, they can't really get FPS boost to work on 360 games, or at least not yet. And it's like, I can understand that might be a bit of a hurdle. But it's like, who wouldn't want to play things like Deus Ex Human Revolution at 60 frames? Who wouldn't want to play Splinter Cell Blacklist at 60? Like, it just makes these games more replayable. Like, I watched Aliens the other day. It's an old-ass film, but I love it. And it's like, I want to revisit older games. So, while I like watching older films in 4K Blu-ray, I want to play my backwards compatible games looking their best. And not all these games are going to get remasters. As many as we might get, literally less than 1% of the games get remasters. And that's just the truth. And not all remasters are good. And if you've played things like, you know, the prototype games and things like Mafia 2 Definitive Edition, like, not all remasters are good. In fact, some of the original versions on 360 are better than the remasters. So it's like, we're going to see more games. And I think I think the November 15th is going to be an eye-opener. I'll just put it that way. But yeah, it should be a good day. And again, there's nothing wrong with more games in general. Now, next up. Apparently, Microsoft has secured a third-party exclusive. Now, this has been something people have talked about for a while. You know, Microsoft has wanted to get, obviously, their own studios making more games than ever before. But one of the biggest talking points is that they do not secure third-party games. It's been a thing known for a while. And people have been wanting them to change that. Look, whether people like it or not, it's a business choice. Whenever Sony locks down a game, it's not available on Xbox. The players on PlayStation aren't getting anything extra. They're getting access to a game they would have been able to play anyway. It's just exclusive to them. But it looks like Microsoft may have signed something that's exclusive to them. So I was looking at all the announced games, and everything has a listing for PlayStation 5, PC, Xbox, PlayStation 5, PC, Xbox, Switch, and all that stuff. And it's like, there are unannounced games that's going to be announced over the next few months. And I was thinking, what does Microsoft not have that people have been talking about recently? And that's been Star Wars games and superhero games. People have been talking about Microsoft for a long time about getting a superhero game. And it's like, wouldn't that make the most sense? Because there are developers working on unannounced superhero games right now. So to me, it makes sense that Microsoft wouldn't want people to associate, let's say, Marvel with just PlayStation. So they would probably work with a partner on securing a third-party title. Because you have to think, their exclusive titles also launch in Game Pass. And that would just be a big get. Not for Microsoft, but for the service in general.
Yeah, I'm fascinated to see what this title ends up being, or if potentially there's more than one. But as you mentioned, superhero games, Star Wars make a lot of sense for titles that fans want and that the Xbox platform could use. Back in the day, Knights of the Old Republic, and then Republic Commando. You bunch of games that were classics that were exclusive to the platform at that time, and it would totally make sense. With Indiana Jones being developed in house by Bethesda and Machine Games, that they have a relationship with Disney that's good. So potentially working out a deal for a superhero game or a Star Wars game makes a lot of sense. Or, I mean, you could go back even further and think, what are some other franchises that historically had some Xbox affiliation at one point or another? I know you talked about Splinter Cell earlier. What if potentially they worked out something about a Splinter Cell? The Splinter Cell's been rumored to being come back now, has been greenlit. What if they somehow snagged a deal with for Splinter Cell? Or what if Ninja Gaiden were to return at some point? A lot of people have been clamoring for a new one of those. What if it's something like that, where it's a game that has Xbox connotations, but maybe I don't know. What do you think?
Well, the thing is, I was looking at, I have a long list of unannounced games coming out, which I'm not going to talk about, but I'll talk about some that are loosely known. So things like System Shock 3. There isn't much information about that. It's been in development hell. Apparently, it's like 90% finished. So that was one of the titles I was looking at. We also have a Bioshock game in development, and that's been in development for about 4 years. We haven't seen anything yet. Splinter Cell. Splinter Cell's in the works. We talked about this last week. Microsoft has had an exclusive Splinter Cell game in the past, that being 2010's Splinter Cell Conviction, which is bloody fantastic. Like, that game is literally 24 the game, and it just works. But, that was exclusive. And, there's also other unannounced games, by THQ Nordic. So you have things like Red Faction Evolution. That thing leaked a year and a half ago. That could be one. You have a new Time Splitters game in development, but that's about 3 years away. But it's like, there's tons of big games in development right now that we have no release dates on or announcements. It's like, it has to be something either like a Bioshock or Splinter Cell, because that would, if it wasn't a licensed title, that would make the most waves. I think people already associate Splinter Cell with Xbox, so that would kind of make sense. Bioshock is still associated with Xbox because of the first game. So, I think when it comes to any title, it's probably one of them. Because I think when it comes to licensed games like Star Wars and Marvel, those have the smallest chance. But again, with things like, KOTOR and Wolverine with PlayStation, It's all up in the air. It could be anything. Who knows? Microsoft could work on a Black Panther game or a Blade game. I will push the Blade game as long as I live. But it's like, it could be anything at this point. There's been rumors about Microsoft working on a Mandalorian game. Now, those rumors I do think weren't real, but it's like the fact that they potentially could work on a Star Wars game. Because no one in a million years thought KOTOR, a remake, would be exclusive to PlayStation. Nobody thought that. Yet there it is. So that just goes to show that Sony doesn't have to have the license and movie rights to something just to secure a game. The truth is, anyone can. Nintendo have an exclusive Marvel game. People tend to forget about that when this conversation topic comes up. But they have one. So it could be anything. And, with the Game Awards around the corner, and Microsoft hasn't really talked about the EXO 2021 yet, which who knows that if that'll happen now. But it's like, with the Game Awards coming up, like, it seems like Microsoft does want to surprise people. And they surprised people in the past, especially with the announcement of Xbox Series X. So it's like, wouldn't it make sense to have a big game avail like that? It's something like the Game Awards.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think they are gonna have their foot on the gas, full go, like Chief with those Marines off the cliff with the Warthog. I think they're gonna pedal to the metal at the Game Awards. I would expect a noticeable Xbox presence. I'll put it that way. I think they will definitely show off some stuff and make it known that they're not messing around.
Yeah, and as we're talking about this topic, the whole studio thing keeps coming up. And Microsoft, they're working with like various developers around the world. And it's always up in the air. This whole acquisition season topic comes up a lot, and I'm sure people are sick of it. The truth is, when it comes to game news, people want the news to happen. They don't want the rumors like that. But the truth is, I've been reading gaming, news for decades now, and rumors have always been the number one topic. But when it comes to Microsoft and the time when they're growing, Phil recently said they aren't done. They aren't done. And when you look at the studios they're working with, like, I have a list of studios I think they will pick up eventually, and I'm going to go over them quickly. So, IO Interactive. They are working on an exclusive Dragon game for Xbox. Please, people, whenever dragons come up, can we not mention Scalebound? Like, I'm sick of that being brought up. I just want to mention that quick, but it's like,
bring it back.
People will say that at every given opportunity. But it's like IO Interactive, that's probably one of the best ones in my opinion. They are working with Avalanche Studios on Contraband. And, I'm not entirely sure if they owned or just heavily work with. I think they just heavily work with Square Enix, but like, they seem like one of the most like reasonable pickups for Microsoft. But it's like, it's clear that they have all these relationships going on right now, and they work with people like Azobo on Flight Simulator, who also make A Plague Tale, which is also coming to Game Pass day one. So it's like they have their fingers in all these pies at the minute, and we just don't know what they're gonna eat. So it's like, we have to look at like the relationships they already have, because again, IO Interactive just keeps coming up. Like, is the most likely studio because they are complete free agents now. They do have a publishing deal, or should I say did, with Warner Brothers for Hitman, but that's over now. And they are working on a game outside of James Bond that's a new IP. So there's that as well. But I don't know. Who do you think they pick up?
I would say IO comes immediately to mind as well to me. And even going back further, like you listen to interviews Phil and Matt Booty have done in the past, and relationships and previous work done together is a huge factor, and leadership at the studios. Like, even if they didn't have a huge relationship with a given studio, if they had a revered studio head who has an established track record of like, man, this guy's a legend, he does great work, then they were interested. Like, for example, in Exile, they didn't have a huge relationship with the studio itself from doing projects, but um, Brian Fargo is a legend in the industry. He's been around decades. He's made some incredibly influential franchises, and he's a legend in RPGs. So, and he knew the studio head at Obsidian from their times at Black Isle. So it just then, Tim Schafer at Double Fine, he's friends with these guys as well. And they had a previous relationship with Psychonauts, even though that relationship was kind of it wasn't great at that time because of they dropped it and they ended up getting picked up by Majesco to make the game. But they came around and they patched things up, and now they have a great relationship. And then, Playground, they knew them from doing the Forza Horizon series. They're like, these guys are great, and we'll bring them in. And oh, you know what? They're British. They have a good sense of things. Let's let them try Fable. And they're doing Fable. And then you have, Undead Labs that had experience with for State of Decay. And then Ninja Theory was one of the examples of they don't have a huge relationship with them, but they saw potential. And they're like, dude, with this team with 30 people on it, made Hellblade, which was a game awards. It swept things. It did a great job. Imagine what they could do with our manpower and resources. And so I would say following that blueprint, IO makes a ton of sense. They're partnered on the it hasn't quote unquote been announced, but they even leaked it themselves through job listings. Their Dragon project, IO did. So yes, they are working on a apparently an MMO type game with some Diablo esque mechanics for Microsoft. So that seems like a great partner to pick up, especially if they like what they're seeing with the Dragon game. And Hitman itself, the IP, and the way they did seasons and events, it fits beautifully inside the network that is Game Pass. So they seem like a no-brainer to me to pick up. And then you look at Asobo, they're more complicated to acquire because they also have arrangements with Focus Home that they're doing projects with, but they have an established record with Flight Simulator and a bunch of Disney games they did for Xbox and Zoo Tycoon. So if they were available, they make a ton of sense. Not a lot of people mention them, but I think Turtle Rock is one to keep an eye on because of Back for Blood launching day one in Game Pass, and it's hit over 6 million people now playing worldwide. Not all on Game Pass, but it's got good numbers, and so that would fill a void and a need. And they know them and have worked with them before. Um, it make a lot of sense. I think Crystal, if Square wanted to shed their Western publishing branch, Crystal and Eidos make a lot of sense. Particularly Crystal, because it's incredibly uncommon for studios of that magnitude to just become available and work together on a title like that. Like not just support studios, but major studios from a major publisher just work with you on a big title like this, and they'd be perfect fit with Gallagher's previous studio. He knows them inside and out. They're very talented. They make a lot of sense, and maybe Square would want to wash their hands of some debt and some money that they piled up from Avengers not doing as well. So they make a lot of sense. And then if Moon was ever changed their minds on independent, they would be at top of a wish list because they're brilliant. And they'd give Xbox a studio Ghibli type studio, which would be awesome. But yeah, those are and then if Xbox wanted to get into the engine space, like they're talking about using ID Engine more and stuff like that. So Crytek would make a lot of sense if they did Rise together. So that would potentially be a fit. And you could also license out the Crytek engine. So I don't know. There's a bunch of studios, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if it's nothing anybody predicts, and it's just some studio that comes out of left field, but then it just makes sense later on.
Yeah, you're right. It could pretty much be anyone. But when you mention Crytek, I think there's a few people that'd be thinking, Rise 2. Like, I would love to see what a Rise 2 would look like, especially on this new hardware. Um, but yeah, it could literally be anyone. And the thing is, I think Microsoft's proven in the past they don't want to wait till E3 now to show these studio announcements. They announced multiple studios in the past at XO. I think it was 19, but they clearly don't really care about waiting until E3 to show these studios now. So it's going to be an interesting time. And I know people might be getting sick of the whole acquisition talk, but the truth is, Microsoft's still growing. They've been growing for a long time. People wanted Microsoft to buy studios back when they had like four, and it's still going on. Microsoft wants to have more studios, and I think in a time when Tencent's buying everything, it's pretty much the best time for Microsoft to go on the hunt and buy studios, especially in a time where all these developers right now are working on big games, and it mitigates risk for the developer at the end of the day. Um, but talking about new studios, now Rand and Jez from the Xbox Two podcast, shout out to them. Jez recently talked about an MMO being worked on by Xbox Game Studios, and I think that's interesting because it's not the studio making it, it's the tech and what they want to do. They want to have a complete cloud-based MMO. And that got me thinking, like, what do they mean by cloud-based? Like, do they want a crackdown situation with destructible buildings or anything like that? It's like, no, it's like, and I've never thought about this, but it's actually pretty smart. They want this to not just scale from device to device. So right now, when you play a game on xCloud, you're playing the base game, but when you play it, you have touchscreen controls or you have access to a Bluetooth controller, and it's the same game. And we're used to that. It's been like this since we've had streaming available since, I think, OnLive. What they want to do is have a game that not only scales the screen, but its gameplay and its mechanics per device. So I was thinking about this, and it's actually really well done because you look at certain areas and like territories where mobile gaming is the biggest thing. Playing certain games on mobile, it's not fun. First person shooters on mobile, they aren't fun. They really aren't. Playing third person games on, mobile, it's not fun. But if you can scale the gameplay mechanics to whatever device you're on, that opens up so many different opportunities. So the situation I had in mind, and I know a lot of people listening that will have played this, when you play Fable 2 and you get to the first, main village, Bowerstone, you have to go and, earn money. And one of the things you do is play a mini game in the blacksmithing, forge. And I was thinking, like, wouldn't that be the type of thing they're talking about? So whereas you're playing this MMO on console where you're wandering a vast land doing quests, well, wouldn't it make sense to have something like a smithing minigame, like Fable 2, on the mobile device that someone can just, tap away while they're on a train or on a bus? And it's like, I think that's what Microsoft wants to do because, again, I would not want to play a third-person MMO on a tablet or on my iPhone, but I wouldn't mind doing some things like, a smithing game or mini games in general. And I don't know, that's my take on the situation. What do you think?
Yes, PAX Day, I believe, is what it would. The working or progress title was that Jeff Grubb further corroborated in an article about, and it's from Mainframe, a Finnish studio, I believe. It looks like a fascinating case study in gaming, to where like you said, I love the idea of being able to do like, I've got a few minutes here or there, I'm on the go. I can craft a sword, or I can, upgrade my armor, or I can mix a potion, or earn some money while I'm out doing something, and I have a few minutes, and I don't have to, have a heavy focus, to where you can do these smaller tasks or kind of like even like in Dragon Age Inquisition, the war table, like something like that you could do on your phone. Like you set up a few missions and then you check on later. And then when you get back home, you can, play on your big TV or your PC and, do the main quests and go out and venture into this huge world. It seems like a really clever idea to me.
Yeah, and like in certain territories, like MMOs are getting huge, especially in Japan, a market they are trying to break into. So it would seem like it would be a good way to do an MMO, and like just the whole forging thing from Fable was just something that came to mind because again, that was just hitting one button in that mini game to forge like a sword or something. So that would seem really suited to a mobile device. But then that got me thinking, like, if you look at all the Game Pass games right now, you've got platformers, first person shooters, an array of RPGs now. And you've got pretty much titles from every single genre. And they have had Black Desert in the past. I'm not sure if it's still there, but it's like they don't have an MMO. And having a first party MMO outside of Elder Scrolls, Elder Scrolls, that has a huge player base. 18 plus million players. They're still updating the game. They have a team at Bethesda working on a new MMO right now. This is a different game to that, so we're going to potentially be seeing two MMOs from Xbox Game Studios, which is kind of weird to think about because if you look at them at the beginning of the generation, they had studios making three games: Halo, Forza, and something else. Fable, yeah, Fable at the time. But it's like they have all these games in development right now, and like the fact that we're gonna have an MMO that's cloud based, and I know the whole cloud thing scares a lot of people. You have to be connected to the internet, but with it being an MMO, you kind of have to be connected to the internet anyway. And what I've learned from MMOs is that it's not always forced multiplayer. So, like, I play Star Trek Online. Yes, I'm a nerd. But I play Star Trek Online, and you play pretty much 99% of the time single player. You barely encounter other players. You play missions solo. And, it got me thinking, like, an MMO can kind of cater itself to multiple different players. You have the people that want to play with other people in co-op. You can do that in an MMO. It's like, an MMO isn't necessarily the worst thing for Microsoft. And I've gone from disliking the idea of an MMO to really understanding it more and liking it because again, Star Trek Online, you play it solo, you play it by yourself. Things like Destiny, you can play a majority of it by yourself. Avengers, people can hate it all they want, but at the end of the day, you can play 20 hours of that content by yourself. So when it comes to Game Pass and Microsoft wanting to grow in different genres, it kind of makes sense if you think about it. Like this is just me, thinking like, imagine a Fable MMO, like outside of the mainline game. Like I think people would be down for that because again, Final Fantasy does the same thing. You have the mainline titles sell millions, and then you have the MMO. They've had multiple MMOs, and it's like it just seems like the natural progression for some of their IP. Something like Fallout, they have a lot of IP that could reach different genres. Like Halo, we were going to get a Halo MMO on the Xbox 360. Like, thanks to Don, we'll never say that now, but it's like, it just goes to show that Microsoft's probably willing to open up their IP portfolio to other developers for new genres. And frankly, that's exciting. We have a Gears of War turn-based game. Nobody would have thought that would have happened. So personally, I think it's an exciting time. Again, we're talking about the Game Awards. It just goes to show Microsoft is willing to show things at times that, let's face it, not wait till E3. Like, they will show games at other times. They're willing to work on multiple different genres that aren't first-person shooters now. They've shown that. And we have all these leaks by Microsoft that they're working on MMOs. Like, there's something cooking. There's Microsoft's up to something, and it's exciting because I mentioned this last week, but I have to mention it again. Like, at the beginning of the generation, when people bought their Xbox One consoles and took them home, you couldn't enjoy it. You couldn't. And it was sad because, like, a new generation kicked off and gamers weren't allowed to talk about what they were enjoying or what they liked. And Microsoft was in the worst state ever. And you look at how far they've come. And it's like, gamers can enjoy it now. They can enjoy their consoles. They can look forward to all these studios making games, and they have access to some of the best tech on the planet, and they're continuing to grow and listen to feedback. Hell, today we got an announcement that Twitch integration is coming straight to Xbox. And if anyone played Mixer, or should I say used Mixer, it's going to work like that. You're going to be able to access Twitch directly from the dashboard. It just goes to show like they're not just willing to listen to feedback, but they're growing as well. And Xbox, 20 years later, they're still in the game, still like coming out with surprises. And I don't know, man. What do you think? Like, it's a good time to be an Xbox gamer.
I would say that Xbox has reached the point that they were in the 360 OG era of greatness right now, where they've reached the zenith where they have all these projects in development, a bunch we know about and a bunch we don't know about. And then there's deals to be done and studios to acquire and novel approaches to things like cloud gaming or touch controls or streaming or accessibility, whatever whatever your fancy. They're trying a whole bunch of different things in not just traditional gaming avenues, and it's a brilliant time to be an Xbox fan. I think this will be the best generation they've ever had, and I don't say that lightly as someone who revered the 360 and the OG generation. So I cannot wait for what they have in the pipeline, the things we know about, and the things that we maybe know about have been rumored, and then the complete surprises like, oh my gosh, I did not see that coming. I just I cannot wait. And you mentioned spin-offs earlier. There's a whole bunch of their IPs, both the ones that are sitting in storage waiting to be resurrected, and the ones that are fresh and on everybody's minds at the moment that could use a spin-off. Like, Halo, I say it all the time. I think a flood-based horror game on Halo would be awesome. Or like Rare had an idea back in the day where they would have done like another a Diddy Kong Racing type game, but it would have been with their other Rare mascots instead. I still think that would be fill a huge void for family friendly. Or if they did a fighting game, whether it be Killer Instinct 2 or different one with all the Xbox characters in it. Like, there are so many different spin-off choices they could potentially do. I remember that Mega Bloks Halo game looked awesome that got canceled. Resurrect that. You mentioned Fable MMO. They had Fable Legends, which looked really fun. What if they brought that back? There's so many cool ideas that they could do with existing IP, both current of mind and away in storage, that the future is bright, and I can't wait to see what they do. And I'm excited to see who ends up joining the Xbox family as well.
Yeah, it's a good time, man. And I think, well, we have the Xbox anniversary event coming just over 2 weeks away, which is it's a big milestone. And yeah, it's good times. And again, we're going into the holiday season. We have Forza Horizon coming out on the 5th, and then we have Halo coming out in December, and there's a bunch of Game Pass games coming out between now and then. I think we have the Forgotten City coming out either tomorrow or the day after, but it's like uh, there's a lot of stuff to play, which is exciting. But yeah, that's it for today. We've actually gone through a lot of topics, and again, we're probably going to have weekly rants about me and Square Enix because that's a relationship that's tainted. But yeah, anyway, have you got anything coming up, Logan?
Uh, no, I'm really, really, really looking forward to the 20th anniversary event, and I think it's going to be a great time for Xbox fans, both longtime fans and newer fans. It'll be a great look back at things that have come before and maybe where they're planning to go. And I know they said no new game announcements, but I do think it will be a good event and be fun for everyone. And I look forward to the Game Awards. Expect Xbox to drop some things there that will, you know, that will jolt the senses and get the Twitterverse rumbling. So I think it's going to be a great end of year, and Xbox has proven that they don't have to wait till E3, like you said. They have enough in the pipeline that if they wanted to, they could probably announce something small to big every month for a while if they really wanted to. So it's just a perfect time to be an Xbox fan, man.
Yeah, yeah. Everyone, I think people should keep their eyes peeled over the next few years because again, Microsoft drops news at pretty much any time. And yeah, that's pretty much it for today. Everyone in chat, for the most part, has been fantastic today. Sorry for the audio interruption. That's the problem with these live shows. Like the little bit, like a tiny bit of like bad internet connectivity or weather can just completely mess things up. And I've constantly got Down Detector open just to see if it's actually going to mess up. But we live and we learn. Anyway, if you enjoyed today's video in the podcast, please like, share, and subscribe. Hit the bell for notifications. Please, again, share. It really helps the podcast out. We're trying to grow. I have a lot of cool things planned. I have guests coming in the future. And yeah, follow us on Twitter. The links will be in the description down below. I am out. I hope everyone has a good day. Peace.